Welcome to Policy Watch Election 22 from the Menzies Research Centre. Adam Bandt addressed the National Press Club this week where he made two things very clear. First, the Greens have dropped any pretence that they're merely trying to clean up the planet. Under Bandt, the party has become a socialist party of the hard left that advocates state-run economy, punitive taxes, restrictions on free speech, the appeasement of tyrants, and free dentistry. Second, Bandt is confident he'll be able to pursue this agenda in government as the coalition partner with Labour in a hung parliament. Labour's chances of forming a minority government at the mercy of the Greens grew this week, in my view, with Labour leader Anthony Albanese's shocking start to the campaign. Labour remains in front, but at this stage, the chances of governing in its own right is slight, which is why we're obliged to take Bandt's speech more seriously than we otherwise would. So here goes. His agenda represents an unprecedented transfer of wealth from the middle class to the university-educated elite whose interests the Green Party serves. The Greens plan to forgive around $69 billion of outstanding student loans as a prelude for making university education absolutely free. Graduates who've been working hard to pay off their HECS debt are entitled to feel miffed by this, as are those who've never had the privilege of attending university in the first place. They're the ones who will shoulder the burden of the debt of the fortunate few. Bandt will eradicate billionaires, either by bleeding them dry with an annual wealth tax or, as seems more likely, forcing them out of the country. Bandt just simply doesn't get rich people. He seems to think they just stash their money under the bed rather than invest it in job-creating enterprises or giving it to philanthropic causes. That's far from the only unintended consequence of Greens' policy. By shutting down the production of coal and gas, they'll strengthen Russia's hand as an energy superpower. They will nationalise housing, healthcare, electricity, transport and education, making the productive economy less productive. Instead, there'll be a massive increase in the woke economy, providing jobs for graduates with useless degrees. Measures here include $783 million extra for the ABC and the expansion of the Australian Communications and Media Authority so that it can better police the Murdoch press. The Australian Human Rights Commission will be expanded, of course, and there'll be a network of working women's centres around the country and other similar things. There'll be programs to make the public sector more diverse and inclusive, for example. Federal MPs, senators and Commonwealth employees will undergo compulsory anti-racism training in order to unpack white privilege and white fragility in the context of personal, professional and community spaces. Well, Adam Bandt's intended coalition partner, Anthony Albanese, is going out of his way to say he'll have nothing to do with these kind of policies. He's a moderate, after all. In a headline over a Daily Telegraph interview with him last month, Albanese proclaimed, "I'm not woke." Well, we shall see, because Labour is obliged to fight for the votes of 18 to 34-year-olds, where these kind of policies are popular, particularly amongst women. When you look at the breakdown of age differences between voters for the different parties, you see the problem. A survey of 6,000 voters by Compass polling, conducted in the last 2 months, shows that some 57% of Green voters have university degrees, 46% of Labour voters have university degrees, and 44% of coalition voters, just 30% of One Nation voters. Now, when it comes to age, 49% of Green voters are under 35. Just 19% of them are 55. The under 35s account for 32% of Labour voters and 21% of coalition voters. On the other hand, 47% of coalition voters are over 55 compared to just 34% of Labour voters. Labour seems to have lost the trust of the over 55s. So these stark differences in the supporters of the three different parties highlight Labour's problems. Having lost the trust of older voters, Albanese's only path to victory is to win the support of large numbers of younger voters, and it's these voters who'll put Labour into office if it wins government, aided and abetted by the Greens. Well, it's probably too much to ask for consistency in Labour's policy platform, but it's odd that a party that argues vociferously for an independent corruption watchdog for federal politicians is determined to scrap the Australian Building and Construction Commission, the organisation dedicated to ensuring fair play in the construction sector. The ABCC's chief benefit is to rein in the excesses of the construction unions, which, if they were left to their own devices, would cost the country billions of dollars in lost productivity. The ABCC was the creation of the Howard government in 2005, but it was scrapped in 2012 by Gillard Labor government. The MRC's 2016 report, Constructing a Better Future, noted that the days lost to industrial action increased by 34% after the ABCC was scrapped. The report calculated that the IR premium paid to taxpayers on infrastructure, i.e. the extra costs that come from having to give in to the demands of the unions, was around 30%. So to put that another way, when the CFMEU is allowed to rule the roost, we get a 400-bed hospital built for the price of a 520-bed hospital. Fortunately, the ABCC was reinstated by the coalition government after our report was published. Labor's plan to abolish the ABCC is an act of pure economic vandalism. It's doing it purely for the convenience of the unions in return for their campaign donations and muscle. In other words, it's just the kind of cronyism we hope that a federal corruption commission might investigate, should it ever be established. Well, it'd be wrong to accuse the Greens of having no plans to cut spending. They're planning to cut defence spending to 1.5% of GDP by buying fewer guns and tanks. The Greens also promised to get rid of US bases on Australian soil and renegotiate the ANZUS agreement. In the Greens' view, the object of the agreement should not be to defend ourselves against bad actors, but making us a better global citizen. That's what they say. They also say it's time to stop handing public money to corporate weapons manufacturers, refocus our defence forces on keeping people safe from the climate crisis, and build cooperative relationships with our friends and neighbours. Good luck with that one. Well, full marks to the Prime Minister for correctly answering the question, what is a woman? In an interview on 3AW last week. The PM replied confidently that a woman is a member of the female sex. Well, this once straightforward question has become a litmus test for politicians and bureaucrats around the world with the rise of woke theory that claims that one's sex, or gender as they prefer to call it, is a social construction. A woman, to follow woke's illogic, is anybody, regardless of biology, who says they're one. Some political strategists are inclined to put issues like this to one side in an election. Scott Morrison, in my opinion, was right to tackle it head on. This week he repeated his support for Senator Claire Chandler's bill that will give sporting bodies the right to restrict single-sex competitions on grounds of biology. Morrison is right because these subjects touch on important matters of conviction and voters must know what a leader stands for. A survey that came across my desk in the week shows that Morrison is on firm ground. 4 out of 5 coalition supporters agree with him that womanhood is determined by biology, not identity. 6 out of 10 Labour voters think that way too. We await Albanese's contribution to this debate with some interest. Well, you can join us in fighting banned ideas by subscribing to the Menzies Research Centre from just $10 a month. Go to our website, www.menziesrc.org, or click on the QR code on your screen.